that need to be put down or deported. Okay? You are mixing this kind of sentiment that you see online with the experiences that you have with right-wingers in the real world. Okay? Right-wingers in the real world at most will be like, yeah, I think the government has a heavy hand here, you know? But they really shouldn't be resisting against the ICE agents that are just trying to do their job. An important strategy here to here is Botco Anarchia. An important strategy is to learn to appear and disappear at a moment's notice, to move like water, render their barricades and kettling tactics useless, drain their resources and morale by forcing them to pack up and move their heavy equipment as often as possible. This is how naval wars are fought. One cannot station ships in one place forever, so instead they attack their targets and are gone by the time backup arrives. Territory is controlled through the fear of the enemy being able to appear out of thin air at any moment. The same can be applied to cities. The cops gain nothing by holding empty streets, and it costs them money for every second they waste doing it. This is how to apply real pressure to an institutionally organized enemy. Control the response. Be unpredictable. That's what Bacco Anarchia's suggestion is. How do you argue with these people? Genuine question. How many of my friends are like this? It's annoying. How do you even argue with people like this? I mean, you have to realize, like, it comes from a place of selfishness. The reason why a lot of people react like this to you, if you do attend these like events, if you do actually go out and protest, and the reason why they react to you like this is because deep down inside they recognize that there is a moral failing that they have, and they're upset that your existence and your actions actually highlight that moral failure. That's what it is. It's a projection of guilt. Exactly. If your friends are insecure and lashing out at you in bad faith and claiming that you're simply not doing enough when they're doing nothing, the reason why they're doing that is because the real question that they want to ask you, but they're too embarrassed to ask you, is, why won't you do nothing like me? Why are you doing something? Why won't you do nothing like I'm doing and also simultaneously make me feel better in comparison? So it's good. I guess the silver lining there is that they still have this internal moral dilemma, and you can push them in the right direction to be like, listen, man, I do this because I believe in it. I do this because I know that eventually this will harm me and my friends, and I have empathy for these people, and I want to use the privilege that I have to do whatever I can to put a stop to this, to at least put a hurdle, to create any kind of hurdle I can to stop the government from taking these actions. Do you understand? You're a scumbag? Wait, why? What did I do that makes me a scumbag in this what is going on today? A lot of first-time chatters just like angrily lashing out. I haven't done anything to you or said anything that's like that crazy today, have I? What happened? Is the reason so many people hate Greta Thunberg? Her actions and words make people feel guilty and shitty? Exactly. It's the same reason why Democrats hate Bernie Sanders. Anyway, here's a cool video. At the ICE raid and subsequent community resistance, this skater kid ate dozens of munitions from Border Patrol agents, walked away slowly, and flipped them off. Look at this. Do you feel like this is a righteous response? Do you feel like this is a just response? Do you feel like this is a de-escalation? I do want to mention something here, and I want you to remember something. By the way, Vekanon, thank you for the 20 gifted subs, and Burgles, thank you for the 100 gifted subs. Forgot to mention those. This is part of the reason why I also love going to these protests as well, in spite of the very real danger that everyone that attends could potentially bring about themselves, right? It's because when you're online under the guise of anonymity, you hear a lot of heinous things from people, okay? You hear people lashing out. You hear people saying like ridiculous things. And you're like, wow, how can people be so ruthless? How can people be so cruel? And if you spend a lot of time online and not amongst your fellow Americans, okay, it will warp your perspective of not only who your neighbors are, but it will warp your perspective of even yourself. So when you actually go out in the real world, and you interact with other people, and you go out and go to these protests and see people standing up in solidarity and also putting themselves on the line, putting their lives on the line, putting their freedoms on the line like this, you are reminded that there are a lot of other people like you out there. There are a lot of other people who see how unjust this current administration's immigration enforcement actions are. Okay? That's it. Protests are the highest form of touching grass.
Tolerance policy for criminal behaviour and violence, especially when that violence is aimed at law enforcement officers trying to do their jobs. These criminals will be arrested and swiftly brought to justice. The Commander-in-Chief will ensure the laws of the United States are executed fully and completely. Well, I want to show you some of the...
Yeah, this is the other thing. Ordinary people are resisting empire. Ordinary people resisting empire aren't trying to build careers in activism or anti-colonial theory. They're fighting because their families are being torn apart and trampled by a machinery of that has no conscience. If you can't afford the courage to fight back in real ways, then at the very least, don't demean those who do. Bless their hands, their hearts, and their unshakable resolve. And then instantly, look. So breaking the law has consequences. Ordinary people don't behave like animals. Resisting empire. Oh, these people weren't here legally. Attacking those cops isn't resisting empire. Now I don't care what Israel does to your lot. Disloyalists. They fear nothing more than having to live in their own countries. You think these guys, you think this kind of sentiment is commonplace in the real world? If you do, you are mistaken. Because what's happening in the real world is something that we're watching right now. It's the tens of thousands of people that instantly rush the streets. People who support terrorists are terrorists themselves. You try and spin this. And for the record, before you say, oh, well, some of my coworkers do think this way, there are plenty of your coworkers who don't. My point is, there's not one single normal reply to this. Okay? Virtually every reply to this, every single reply to this is like, no, they deserve it. They're animals. They must get deported. I fucking doubt that your coworkers would, in this loud of a manner, no matter how right-wing they are, turn around and tell you to your face, no, they're fucking animals that need to be put down or deported. Okay? You are mixing this kind of sentiment that you see online with the experiences that you have with right-wingers in the real world. Okay? Right-wingers in the real world at most will be like, yeah, I think the government has a heavy hand here, you know? But they really shouldn't be resisting against the ICE agents that are just trying to do their job. Something along those lines. Not fucking, yeah, they need to be killed. They need to be put down. Most people are too cowardly, even if they feel this way. Most people are too cowardly to fucking openly state their violent desires. Okay?
You told me you got caught up in the tear gas as well. Describe what happened to you.
Oh, just tasted a little tear gas. Tasted like fascism.
Anyway, Oldham was that. Okay.
The latest pictures from Los Angeles, and they come in the last hour. They show law enforcement officers wearing protective equipment, including helmets, coming out of the Federal Detention Center. Now, several of them fire tear gas towards the protesters, and it also...
You're a fraud, go protest, pussy, dickhead, schmuck, asshole, Hasan, keyboard warrior. I am going later today, in a little bit, as a matter of fact. Will this change your calculation of who I am? Will you admit that you are wrong? Or will you move the goalpost instantly? 0 out of 10 rage bait. Sick. I think the sentiment is more common offline than you think. Dude, talk to people. Talk to your peers in the fucking real world, okay? Your coworkers are... even if your coworkers are brain broken by what they have also seen online, you have an incredible amount of fucking power to convince them in the real world by being a normal guy who is cool to be around, who you talk about sports with, okay? There is an endless well of depravity online. People get away with saying whatever the fuck they want, things that they would never be able to say in the real world because of the immediate reaction that they would get. This is... for them, this is their only opportunity to be fucking this violent and this vicious, okay?
also appears that some form of explosive stun projectiles, which are often described as flashbangs, are thrown. Now, this came after the LAPD issued dispersal orders in some parts of the city. They had said that the use of less lethal munitions had been authorised, saying they can cause pain and discomfort. Well, the protesters then did seem to pull back, and then law enforcement officers formed a line and they walked down the centre of the road. You can still see those bangs going off, clearing the area. They were trying to establish a cordon. More tear gas and bang projectiles were thrown. Now, officers say multiple people have been detained for failing to disperse after multiple warnings. Well, in the last half an hour, President Trump has posted on his Truth Social platform. Let me read to you what he said. He said, "Great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles. After 2 days of violence, clashes and unrest, we have an incompetent governor and mayor who were, as usual, just look at how they handled."
Oregon blue collar operator union. I have a shit ton of hot coworkers. Most are uneducated. Most are reactionary in many ways. Many see the extent of poverty and don't know exactly who to blame. But even they think the mass deportations are abhorrent. It melted my brain at first, but I remember they're ordinary people like you and me and still have some sort of empathy in them, regardless of the brand of politics. Exactly. And it is up to all of you to have those conversations with them little by little, piece by piece, and get them to realize who is actually fucking them over. This is why labor education is incredibly important. And it's actually one of the worst aspects of like the modern labor union movements is that there is very little of that. It's like, here, I'll give you a great example, okay? I'll give you a great example. Everyone, every single person, even the most racist person you know, okay, in the real world, I'm not talking about Twitter, will look at images of like dudes outside of a Home Depot getting rounded up and arrested and still come to the recognition that those dudes, if given the opportunity, would put together a fucking entire house of drywall in a matter of 24 fucking hours. Because like, even the most racist guy literally still goes, yeah, Mexicans are some of the hardest workers I've ever fucking worked with. If you ever worked at a job site, okay? They know, which means they understand that these dudes are simply here to work. These dudes are simply here to work and are being already abused and exploited. My point is, even the most racist fucking dude recognizes how hardworking migrant workers are. What is this? Trump's taking press questions?
I think it was very bad. It was covered by almost everybody.
What is the purpose of your meetings in Camp David in the next 24
We're
hours?
going up to Camp David. We have meetings with various people about very major subjects.
Asshole was courtside at the UFC, was ringside at the UFC, while he was like, "That's right, send in the National Guard, kill them all, kill them all."
The fires, and now they're very slow permitting disaster. Federal permitting is complete, unable to handle the task. He goes on to say these radical left protests by instigators and often paid troublemakers will not be tolerated. He also says, from now on, masks will not be allowed to be worn at protests. What do these people have to hide?
Yeah. Oh, dude, by the way, masks are not allowed. Masks are not allowed at the protest. But also, all the ICE agents have to wear masks. Great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles after 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest. By the way, the National Guard only arrived this morning. They did not arrive. They did not arrive last night. Okay, or declare any sort of victory. It's just Trump declaring victory. Also, what would be the fucking National Guard? Several years we've seen Democrats try to take away our freedom of religion, assembly, and speech. We can't let them take away our right to defend ourselves too. South Dakota defends the Constitution. There's always a tweet for it, man.
The Republican governors, they all deserve credit, that stood by Governor Abbott's side. If you didn't stand with him in solidarity, I'm not sure by.
There was a border standoff taking place. If you recall. Governor Greg Abbott was like, we are gonna try and kill as many migrants as possible, like children. And exactly 1 year ago, This was the reaction.
Biden wouldn't have precipitated a real crisis down there.
Yeah, Sean, I went the actual day that showdown was supposed to happen. People asked me why, when I heard the news, I immediately the next day was at the border. And it was because of what I heard Democrats encouraging the president to do. They were encouraging President Biden to activate our National Guard soldiers so that they would stand down. He actually was going to take control of our South Dakota National Guard and actually activate them so that they would not protect America. So recognizing the real threat that was to states' rights and how that would be the first time in history a president would pay a soldier to not fight, to not protect our country, made me show up in Texas the next day to let Governor Abbott know I'm here. South Dakota is with you. We will defend our Constitution. We will defend our rights, because the last several years we've seen the Democrats take away our freedom of religion, our freedom of assembly, our freedom of speech. We can't let them take away our states' rights, too, especially our right to protect ourselves.
During protests and actions, the pigs will typically form up in skirmish lines, red and green below, to block intersections, protect key areas, and kettle protesters. Behind them, 2 squads form a column, blue and yellow, with the arrest team up front. This will become the arrow. The next part is key. When they're prepping for a crossbow arrest, you'll see a squad leader talking to the arrest team at the front of the arrow to ID their target. In this clip, you see them pointing and ID Steven, then break through the skirmish line at the move command. Once they've snatched their target, the pigs will form a circle around the arrest team. Conveniently, this also obscures them from press and others monitoring. It was at this point that Velasquez and Cardinal of Newton Division wrestled Steven into the ground and injured his face and head. The LAPD falsely arrested Steven, beat him, later changed to a detention, then released him without bail. The pigs violate people's rights and then brutalize them like this on a regular basis. Here, let's hear what the CNN reporting is on the ground.
And I'm just going to have you sweep through. What you're looking at is we have seen this front line of soldiers from the National Guard. They are carrying sticks. They are carrying their standard issue M4 rifles. It does look like they have magazines on them, which suggests...
Does this change your perspective on law enforcement law? What are you talking about?
That they are carrying ammunition. Behind them in blue, who you can be forgiven, Jim, that it does look like the same blues of the LAPD. Those are officers from the Department of Homeland Security. Those yellow attached items, they look like they are preparing to deploy tear gas. And then I want you to look at the next wave, the officers standing behind DHS. There's another group of officers holding a type of weapon I can't quite decipher. They also have handguns on their side. It looks like, I can't tell if it's a handgun or a taser. And then beyond them, it's impossible for photographer Mike Love to see, but that entire...
California National Guard literally has M4s on them. What the fuck? It's like live ammunition. Those are live rounds. Those are not less than lethal, okay? Those are just straight up, like, some of them have paintball guns, but there are people with like actual fucking lethal ammunition. I mean, even the dudes with paintball guns have obviously like state issued handguns with them too.
Black
it's crazy.
Hole. I can see with my naked eye a number of soldiers. They do look like Army National Guard. They are wearing shields. They are carrying those large body shields.
They aren't paintball guns, they're pepper guns.
So we are looking at waves of law enforcement in order to deal with potentially a crowd. And on that point, I want you to turn, Mike, if you could just give us a look at this crowd. It's not a very large crowd. I've covered a lot of protests in Los Angeles, both in local news as well as here at CNN. And this is not anything resembling what I've seen in previous times where the LAPD has handled it, where we have not seen the deployment of the National Guard at this level, and certainly haven't seen the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, less lethal, by the way, means it is lethal if you shoot someone in the head with it. And these fucking assholes often will aim for the head.
Or waves of law enforcement. This is something that I've never seen before. So what we are doing is watching to see what is happening. The tempers are flaring, but right now we haven't seen anyone taken into custody. Though people are shouting at each other, there hasn't been any sort of physical contact.
Yeah, people get shot in the head and lose their eyes and stuff. Likely they already did. Federal pigs are shooting tear gas canisters at the heads of press in LA right now. Protest journalists like a cat with news and Ryan Nemina were attacked while covering the uprising against ICE today. Both reporters have checked in but are currently covered in CS gas, currently reviewing footage. Thinks it may be a tear gas canister he took to the forehead. Overreaction? You're right. They should actually kill them under normal circumstances. It's an overreaction that they shot at City Hall.
And why, he says. Again, thank you to the National Guard for a job well done. Well, we at the moment can't yet verify whether the National Guard have actually deployed to LA. But earlier, one of the protesters described why they had come out onto the streets.
Purpose was to peacefully tell them to not take our people. We overheard, it's been shared, that ICE had came to our towns. We're just here living, working. They stopped at Home Depot where they know that people are undocumented. So us as a community have came here to try to make peace so that they don't make families separate one another. And what did they do? They just started to attack us. We were peaceful, and all of a sudden, they started throwing bombs at us. I know a lot of us just unified together on the other side to not let the bus that was coming in with all the police. And then instead of them peacefully telling us to back up, they just started.
So if they're undocumented, then, brother, why move the goalpost to all undocumented immigrants must be fucking deported when initially it was the criminals, the good ones get to stay? What happened? I can't wait till they get peppered. Nice, man.
Pepper spraying us. There's a lot of women out there that have pepper spray.
Well, let's put the area where this is happening into a little context for you. Now, Los Angeles, of course, is a huge sprawling city with many different districts, with some of them predominantly populated by particular communities. Now, the Paramount district is about 15 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean and its beaches, and even further from areas like downtown LA, Santa Monica and Beverly Hills. It is a predominantly Latino district, and despite the name, Hollywood's Paramount Studios are located more than 20 miles away. Well, our reporter in Los Angeles is Reagan Morris. She brought us this update.
The area I am, there's a very large law enforcement presence. A lot of the protesters have either dispersed or moved on to other areas, but we can still hear flashbangs going off in the distance, and there were just some fireworks going off, one of the neighbors setting them off. But it's still quite tense. And just about an hour ago, we were walking from one area to another, and somebody threw a Molotov cocktail over the fence where we were, and the LA County sheriffs came rushing out. The guy's leg, actually, their pants caught on fire briefly as he tried to stamp it out, and they were trying to find out who was throwing Molotov cocktails at them. A flashbang accidentally went off next to the police, which made a lot of the protesters laugh, but then they just came in aggressively and moved people out. But we can hear it's still going on, and it moves around. And we're near an area where earlier today, a few hours ago, there was a very large presence of ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, in unmarked cars. And we've been told by some locals that there are factories around here where some migrants are still locked inside, afraid to come out. And that's something we've heard not just over the last few days in LA County, but over the last few months, that a lot of immigrants who do not have legal documents to live here are living in fear, very real fear of being deported.
Now, LA is what's known as a sanctuary city. Just explain what that means.
Well, it's not just LA. Most of California is a sanctuary, and it means that local law enforcement are not meant to cooperate with federal immigration officials. So if an undocumented immigrant, illegal immigrant, was arrested for shoplifting, when they get out of jail, the local authorities are not meant to tell Immigration and Customs Enforcement that, hey, this guy, you can pick him up and deport him, whereas that would happen in most places in Texas. So a lot of lines are being crossed the last few days, though, at least the perception of it, as people see local law enforcement fanned out on the streets after they were called in to help Immigration and Customs federal officials to protect them. But locally, a lot of people just think they blend it into one and see it as cooperation and targeting the immigrant community.
How do you think President Trump ordering in the National Guard is likely to go down? We've already heard from Governor Newsom saying that it is inflammatory and will only escalate tensions.
I think that is what the governor has said, and that's what a lot of the local leaders are saying and people we've spoken to here today, that that would not be well received in a lot of neighborhoods, especially immigrant. This is where I am in Paramount. It's more than 80% Hispanic. It's a very big immigrant community, so it will probably not be very well received. We've heard from our partners at CBS that just in the last hour or so that Governor Newsom and President Trump spoke on the phone for about 40 minutes. We don't know the contents of that phone call, but maybe something has changed throughout that. We don't know.
And this, of course, is all because of President Trump's policy to deport unauthorized migrants.
Yes, that is part of the policy, whereas California policy is more often to protect migrants, whether they have legal documents or not. California is the fourth biggest economy in the world, and a lot of the agriculture sectors in particular, there's a lot of migrants working in those jobs that don't necessarily have legal status in the United States and California, and the economy really relies on them. So they do try and protect law-abiding migrants without proper paper, many of whom pay taxes and go to work every day.
Reagan Morris in Los
Yeah, no
Angeles.
shit.
Well, one
There you go.
witness to the protest that has been going on there over the last few hours spoke to a local reporter at the scene about what they had seen.
We were at a stoplight on the other side of Paramount, right? Over there in Alondra. When out of nowhere, in the stop, immigration agents, ICE, all that came, they came dressed up in all their military gear, and they stopped traffic. When they stopped traffic, we started noticing, and I told my girl, that's immigration right there. What they started doing was they went in front of a business, a negocio, and they started raiding it. They started bringing people out in vans. Once they started doing that, that's when everybody knew, what was going on. And everybody was there in the traffic jam. Everybody, right? You're stuck in your car, in your vehicle. When they saw us looking at them doing all that, that's when they started throwing tear gas. Everybody was still in their vehicles. As soon as one of the tear gas,
you said who was behind you?
Behind us, there was a woman and her young daughter. She was around 13. I kept in touch with them, and as we speak, she's in the hospital because the tear gas bomb hit her right in the face. They were right behind us, taking notice that we're not there to protest. We were stuck at the light, right? But we're witnessing everything happening right in front of our eyes. The tear gas explodes. They come out crying out of their vehicle, and they can't breathe. They're literally on the ground, right? I have the video. I have the footage, right?
And so what do you and your girlfriend do at that point?
We get off, and we see everybody else getting off to record. Peacefully, we do not throw anything at them. We're not yelling at them. We're just recording what's going on because people deserve to know the truth. This is why you guys are here. This is because, these things need to be documented. This is what they wanted. They wanted people to riot. They wanted people to start burning out. Why? Because this is the effect. So they can make us look bad. So they can make us seem that we're the ones causing this, that we started it.
That's Fernando Delgado, a witness to the
Amazing.
protest. Well, Rachel Uranga is the immigration reporter at the LA
That's
Times.
straight up
She told
every
us about
fucking
the
time, by the
latest
way. That's
situation
how it works.
in Los Angeles.
They didn't cut him
Less
off.
than
They
an hour ago,
let
I
him
can
say
still
what he wanted to
hear
say.
some of the shots that were ringing out in downtown Los Angeles. There is some clashes going on in Paramount, which is a largely Hispanic community, working class Latino community in Los Angeles, and there's also another small confrontation in downtown Los Angeles, just outside of the federal detention center, where immigrants who have been picked up in raids this week or at courthouses are being held. Los Angeles is a notoriously blue area, and it has a really heavy immigrant population. While there's people here that do think that if you've overstayed your visa or if you aren't here legally, you should face the law. There's a lot of people out here who support the immigrant community and who are tied to it. And just to tell you how deeply embedded California is with this community, it's like 1 out of every 2 children are immigrants. It's a really high number that live and in mixed families. one of the family members has a status that they're not here legally. Los Angeles has turned into ground zero as a test for the limits of Trump's immigration policy. I mean, here, this economy really depends on immigrant labor and on communities that are tied to immigrants. So, the Trump administration has really had some high profile rates here, and it's really tested people. Some people would say, and some politicians have said, it's provoked people. And I think a lot of the politicians are not happy, the local politicians, Newsom certainly, about them sending over the National Guard, that they feel sort of an overblown show of force.
We're seeing new video showing the chaotic moments protesters and federal agents clashed across Los Angeles.
It marked the second day in a row of unrest as ICE raids continue. Explosive flashbangs and clouds of tear gas filled downtown LA last night as police declared an unlawful assembly. There also appears to be some looting at a convenience store in Compton. LAPD says they detained several people and eventually arrested 27.
And this comes as the National Guard troops that President Trump ordered have started to arrive.
Eyewitness News reporter Amanda Palacios joins us live from downtown Los Angeles with the breaking update. Amanda.
Good morning. Yeah, we've already seen a large growing National Guard presence here in downtown LA. If you take a look behind me here, you can see troops are stationed along Alameda Street as another protest is expected to take place later today near City Hall. This follows President Trump's deployment of 2,000 National Guard members in response to a series of immigration protests across the city. This is new video from overnight showing the troops arrive. They stopped at City Hall after driving through Paramount, then ended up here at the Federal Building. Meantime, this follows another night of protest. Video from last night shows tense moments in downtown LA as protesters clashed with police, some setting off fireworks and starting fires. Officers responded with what appeared to be tear gas to disperse the crowds. In a separate incident, demonstrators were seen entering a damaged convenience store in Compton and looting items from inside. According to the LAPD, multiple individuals after a dispersal order was issued on Alameda Street were detained and are expected to be booked for failure to disperse. We spoke with Mayor Bass about the deployment of the National Guard and believes it's not necessary.
My concern, and we have experienced civil unrest, and I remember 1992 very well, that one of the worst things you can do is have an extreme presence of law enforcement that gets everybody agitated and the violence actually escalates.
And today's protest is scheduled for 2 p.m. and the LAPD says officers and the National Guard will remain stationed in this area. Reporting in downtown LA, Amanda Palacios, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Amanda, thank you for the very latest on that this morning.
The National Guard on the streets of LA. 2,000 soldiers deployed at the behest of the president. Donald Trump so determined to crack down on protests, he was thanking them online hours before they arrived. Great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles after 2 days of violence, clashes and unrest, he posted. Adding, these radical left protests by instigators and often paid troublemakers will not be tolerated. Also from now on, masks will not be allowed to be worn at protests. What do these people have to hide and why? Again, thank you to the National Guard for a job well done. Tensions had been running high, law enforcement officers in riot gear attempting to hold the line. There's palpable anger towards ICE agents, immigration and customs enforcement.
We see you for what you are, a terrorist organization. ICE out of Paramount. You are not welcome here.
The trouble flared when federal agents executed search warrants at 3 locations, culminating in clashes outside a detention centre. Protesters demanding those in custody be released. The Trump administration wasting no time in calling in the National Guard.
president's bringing National Guard here to protect the public and protect officers. Where the officers have been attacked, where the officers injured. So he's sending here as a force multiplier for law enforcement here, but not just to protect the law enforcement, to protect the general public. If Democratic leaders want to turn their back on public safety, they can.
That's my boy Jacob.
LA Mayor Karen Bass said mobilizing the National Guard was completely unnecessary and would agitate the population. California's Governor Gavin Newsom accused
Jacob Soboroff, who I'll be
Community
linking
in
over
the
later.
midst of chaos during the protests.
Restaurant workers seen helping deputies in need during ICE protests. Oh my God, look at the propaganda. Oh my God. Oh my God. The media is grabbing onto anything they can. They're like, look at these fast food workers. They care about the beautiful deputies, poor baby deputies. Yeah. By the way, how did that cop get fucking tear gas? You might be wondering. Is it that the average Los Angelino protester has tear gas canisters? Or is it that the wind actually picked up the tear gas? The average Los Angeles protester that pays their taxes, by the way, and it ended up hitting them back in the fucking face. Just a little bit of karmic justice in that moment. I wonder how that happened. Yeah, look at how terrible it is that these guys who were deploying fucking tear gas got tear gas themselves. Horrifying images. Curse the winds, I guess. How dare the winds, how dare the natural elements do this to us, to our big, beautiful, brave boys. Hamas wins.
This is new video showing restaurant workers helping sheriff's deputies in Compton. You can see some of the deputies sitting in the booths as workers help to flush their eyes, likely after getting hit with tear gas. After a short break, the deputies put their gas masks back on and headed back out to help contain the protests.
Let's bring into the conversation right now Kat Abu-Ghazala, who is running for Congress in Illinois' 9th Congressional District. Kat, it's great to have you with us. We had so much that we wanted to talk to you about your own congressional race. We certainly will get to that in a moment. We're going to talk to you about what's happening in the tech world with Elon Musk, somebody you covered in your previous role as a technology critic and a media critic. But let's start with the breaking news that we're seeing this evening playing out in two of our largest cities, New York, Los Angeles. And certainly growing concerns as well, perhaps, of something we might see in Chicago, where previous raids have happened as well. Give me your sense of what you're making of tonight's developments, this escalation, the threats by the border czar, Tom Homan, that the National Guard may be deployed in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I am absolutely horrified. And this is a turning point. We have to decide, are we allowed to have extrajudicial gangs go around our communities, take people from their homes, ship them to God knows where? Is the president allowed to have his own secret army, secret police that can just take people, hurt people? In Chicago, there was just an ICE raid this last week where they tricked people who were following the legal immigration process into coming for a check-in and then arrested them and assaulted protesters and elected officials. And what they're doing in LA right now is they're testing the waters. They're seeing if we'll stand for this. Obviously, Los Angeles is standing for their community, but this isn't normal. We can't normalize it. And if this keeps going, it's going to come to your city.
But what do you make of the escalation tonight? I mean, specifically, you're saying things like secret police or gangs. We obviously still don't know who these are. I mean, we've asked Steve Patterson throughout the course of the night a few times if he knows who these authorities are that are on the ground. And he has not yet been able to identify. Federal authorities have not yet identified who is on the ground and what specific operation they are carrying out at this point. But you say that if it comes to your city, to pick up on a point that was brought up earlier, what do you think citizens should be doing here? Because there are two kind of competing principles, the ability to protest and then the concern that these protests may be impeding federal operations. And the U.S. Attorney for Central District of California was very clear. If you are a citizen and impede any type of federal operation, you will be arrested and prosecuted.
What if that federal operation is completely crooked and illegal? What if that federal operation is deporting people to a foreign country without due process? I don't think we should be standing for that federal operation just because it's technically the law. These are our communities, these are our people, and it makes sense that people are terrified and they're angry and they're incensed because no one is safe. If we're allowed to have ICE agents come in with their faces covered in masks and their IDs covered up, and they can just go into any neighborhood, go into any home, say, oh, well, there is a criminal there, there's an illegal there. They could say that about anyone. They can do this to anyone, and they can do it to you too.
The thing that I'm worried about is that it seems like this administration is spoiling for a fight. And while I do think people should protest and should question these masked agents who don't seem to have ID, won't reveal ID, won't give warrants, et cetera, how do you prevent giving the administration the excuse it seems to want to
escalate?
Yeah. To escalate and to turn more violent? That's what I'm really worried about.
I get that worry. And I mean, we see this in regime is they test the waters. They see how much they can scare people into standing by. And I frankly don't blame people that don't want to put their bodily safety or their family's safety in jeopardy. But, you know, we've seen in a neighborhood in San Diego just the other day where neighbors chased ICE vehicles out because the truth is these people, authoritarians, are weak. They are scared. And as soon as you stand up to them, a lot of times they don't know what to do.
They're armed, though.
They are armed, but they still are terrified of people actually understanding that we have power here. And I am not encouraging people to put them and their loved ones' safety in jeopardy. But we have seen time and time again that when you recognize as a community, when you stand by each other, when you refuse to comply with blatantly not only unethical, immoral, but should be illegal orders, that this administration doesn't have power.
So what do you think is the right balance for the Democratic Party to hit when it comes to immigration policy? Since it is a concern of working class voters and Americans overwhelmingly in polls, they do want to see tough border security. They don't want to see what's going on right now, the lawlessness, I think. But what is kind of the happy medium for Democrats to still be tough on security, but not to empower authoritarianism?
I mean, I'm not sure.
By the way, the person speaking here is Kat. She's running for office in Illinois and actually running, as far as I understand, uncontested in the Democratic side because her opposition actually dropped out of the race because she's just really old. Kat is Palestinian. Kat Abuzalek, I think I'm saying her last name correctly. She's Palestinian, of Palestinian descent. She used to work for Media Matters. She now works for Mother Jones, I believe. It's not uncontested, but the Democrat side, like the incumbent has dropped out of the re-election. 9th District is Skokie and Evanston, all the way out northwest suburbs of Chicago. Her opposition was one of the few pro-Palestinian Dems in Congress, though. She should have contested a different district. First of all, her opposition already fucking dropped out. Or the incumbent already dropped out. Secondly, she wasn't pro-Palestinian. She was just a liberal Zionist. But regardless, she was 87 years old or some shit. She was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is not one singular issue, you understand? This is not just about, like, having a Palestinian elected or someone who's pro-Palestine elected. That's not the only issue here. She was in government. She was in government for fucking 40 plus years. Like, come on. I think that it's all right. Mike from PA has been speaking negatively about her campaign, so that's why a lot of people will be criticizing her in chat. Oh, that's why people are saying this. Yeah, I understand why. I mean, I said this as well. Like, she is a critic of Israel, okay? She is a critic of Israel. Her opposition, the incumbent, the current Democratic incumbent, is a critic of Israel. This is true. So Michael from Pennsylvania is not wrong. The difference is she is also incredibly fucking old.
Sure, what we're defining as tougher on security. I feel like the window keeps moving right here. And instead of actually focusing on anything that does make us more secure, on meeting people's material needs, on trying to encourage an immigration process that is not only organized and effective, but helps grow America, helps grow us, go on this like let's be scared, let's demonize people. And Trump has moved this window so far right, where it's saying anyone that wants to immigrate is, by definition, a criminal. They're deporting like children that have cancer and not making sure that they even have the care they need when they go with their parents that are being deported. This is beyond the pale. And just because Stephen Miller wants to get quotas of brown people that he doesn't want to see on the streets doesn't mean that we should think it's okay.
Yeah, and to your point, even though Trump talks about how he's going to target criminals and gangbangers and drug dealers, if you look at the actual data, the highest increase in the number of people who are in ICE detention are people without any criminal records or criminal charges. And there are a lot of people who have been here legally, hundreds of thousands of people who've been let in legally, whose legal protections he's taken away. So he's effectively turned them
into illegals.
Into illegals, yes.
Into
Exactly.
undocumented, yeah.
Well, Kat's going to stick around, and we're going to talk more about your run for Congress and if the Democratic Party has a leadership problem, a branding problem at this moment. So I want to get your thoughts. And we'll continue our coverage of those immigration protests in California. You're watching The Weekend Primetime.
Joining us now, Julian Zelizer, professor of history and public affairs at Princeton University, and Kevin Barron, national security analyst and president of Elevation Global Strategies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Weekend. Julian, let me start with you and the question about, and this is the thing that vexes me the most about what we're talking about with regard to Los Angeles. The defense secretary saying that if the violence doesn't subside, that he will deploy Marines on U.S. soil there in Los Angeles. Tell viewers why that historically, why that has never happened and why that has never happened.
Well, presidents are very reluctant to deploy this force. There is legislative constraints on their doing so. And either they have the Insurrection Act, which does give presidents broad authority to use this kind of force, but has been very reluctantly deployed, or with regards to the National Guard, there is work with the governor of the state to bring in forces when needed. But what the secretary is announcing is a whole other level.
There's something very funny about Trump being president during January 6th and doing January 6th himself while being president and refusing to invoke the Insurrection Act during a literal insurrection and then simultaneously entertaining the notion of invoking the Insurrection Act for understandable community resistance against like false kidnappings implemented by his federal apparatus, his immigrant enforcement agencies. Like, he was president. If he wanted to stop January 6th, he could have done the Insurrection Act then, right?
Of
Except, of course, he wasn't going to do that. He's not going to call it. He's not going to call his own insurrection an insurrection.
Mention without it being requested. That raises concerns about expansion of presidential power once again, this time combined with the use of force that can be quite dangerous on the ground.
And Kevin, let me just, on this same question, because you used to cover the Pentagon when you were a journalist, talk about, from the Pentagon's perspective, the idea that this could happen, that the Secretary of Defense is thinking, has like warned that he's going to deploy Marines on U.S. soil.
Well, it's something that's on the books and is always possible, but as we're saying, it's so rare. I think, to me, none of this is unexpected. None of this is surprising, right? We heard on the campaign trail, and we heard even in the last Trump administration, they were itching to send troops in to put down the George Floyd, riots and protests, and they've been itching for a reason.
President Trump said he wanted asked why he couldn't shoot.
That's right.
He can shoot the protesters,
They've been
according
itching
to
for a reason
Marquez
to do it. So, of course, they don't need to do this. I've heard other commentators talking about how you can see what's happening in the streets. This does not look like something that you need to send in the troops for.
Right.
But it gives them the reason to do what they said they want to do, which intimidates any other city into thinking that it could happen there as well. It intimidates any other, civic protest that might be trying to organize to help either block these police and ICE agents from coming in to do what they're being asked to do. So it's just set up something I've feared the entire time, which is a violent clash between two different types of law enforcement or military forces in this country. When one thinks that they're doing the right and legal job they're being ordered to do, and the other is thinking the same. And here we go. you might see some sort of standoff on the streets of LA.
Julian, you are a historian. We are continuing. Administration officials use the word insurrection over and over and over again, right? They talk about this invasion that's happening. It seems very tied to Title X, which is the law they're leaning on.
Dude on the top
to
right is
be
a
able to send
HasanAbi
in the
head.
National Guard without
Political
the
writer.
request from the governor of California. As a historian, what is the significance of that, right? It doesn't feel like something they're just doing, right? Randomly tweeting about it, right? It seems kind of coordinated.
Well, the point of having that restraint is so that presidents don't do this very easily. We are a country created with a notion that presidential power has to be limited. So limiting the president to cases of invasion is meant to be a check. For the president to keep using that term, to keep bringing the public back to the concept we are being invaded, this is an insurrection, is essentially creating the preconditions rhetorically for the president to then use force, or we saw it with the power of deportation. So the words matter, and the words are essentially the cover that the administration is using to undertake actions we have not seen from many presidents, other than in cases of actual domestic turmoil, such as in the Civil War, or even in 1992 in Los Angeles, or clashes over civil rights back in the 1950s and 60s. This is a whole other level we're entering into, yet a new precedent being set.
Well, and on that note, our colleague Jacob Soboroff interviewed the border czar Tom Homan yesterday, and let's hear what Tom Homan had to say about the California governor and Los Angeles mayor.
Saying that about Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom? Are they at risk of being arrested?
I'll say it about anybody. You cross that line, it's a felony to knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien. It's a felony to impede law enforcement from doing their job.
That's pretty strong language directed towards elected officials.
And we've seen bits and pieces of this. We saw this with the judge in Wisconsin. We're seeing more clashes between the executive branch and other officials, not intellectual or policy clashes, but literal threats of arrest or other kinds of measures. So these are all different kinds of acts of intimidation and expansion. And I think Americans need to be cognizant. Again, federalism, separation of power, limits on executives are all foundational to our country, and they are being tested in every single one of these cases.
Kevin, I want to squeeze in a real quick question to you, because a moment ago, as Julian was answering a previous question, you mouthed to me immunity. Talk about.
This is what I've been thinking about this since yesterday. Look, we can talk about what and it's good to talk about what the laws were meant to prevent or how to slow down. He has immunity. So
from the Supreme Court's decision.
You know he does. And
for official acts.
And you.